Hey everyone, today let's look at the killers who bend the entity's trial rules. Generally, all killers have to follow the same set of rules when entering a trial. They must hunt down the survivors and then place them onto the hooks, going through 2 stages before they are finally sacrificed by the entity, allowing it to feed on their emotions throughout. However, some killers don't follow these rules directly, sometimes out of defiance it seems, and others due to some special treatment they get from the entity. Let's take a look today. Jason is a character that seems to garner quite a bit of favor with the entity, which could be why he's able to move far more freely in the trials, but also able to perform a kill when a survivor hits second stage instead of hooking them. He's an interesting case too, as he can actually do this in multiple ways, with him having 2 different mini-moris. One he performs when a survivor is pierced by a hook spike, and another when a survivor is pinned to a surface. This bending of the rules, I imagine, is allowed by the entity, as it's occurring at a point where the survivor has to be hooked twice first. This means more than likely the entity is somewhat okay with it, as the majority of the emotion that could be gained from the survivor has been gained. The relationship Jason has with the entity appears to be quite solid, with Jason seamlessly blending in with the natural fog of the trials, and actually using it to disappear and reappear during them. This is an ability we've not seen directly with any other killer, showing the two likely have a strong bond, and therefore I think it allows Jason to bend the rules in this way. It doesn't seem like a defiant act. The other reason I think this is the case is that Jason actually fought Unknown, and Unknown is actually one of the entity's biggest haters, it seems. So Jason taking care of it likely pleased it and may have gained him some favor, allowing him to be much more free and bend the rules to his will. Vecna from Stranger Things is another killer who bends the rules, and in a similar way to Jason, with him able to actually mini-mori survivors once they have been fully affected by Worldbreaker and have hit second stage. Again, this is likely a similar deal of the two being on good terms, and therefore Vecna getting some benefits as a result, such as being able to finish survivors however he pleases every now and then. Vecna also seems to bend the rules and performs something interesting, which is how he sinks into the trial ground itself. The trial ground being the entity essentially, almost as if the two are literally merging, or the entity is allowing Vecna to bind with it briefly in order to move throughout the map. This is different compared to other movement killers like Blightsay, who must physically run across the trial grounds, or even other ones who teleport, where they're going through a portal of some kind, or instantly moving. In this case, Vecna is merging into the floor itself, it seems. This relationship is likely solid therefore, and he's allowed to do this as a result of the two powerful entities having a bond of some kind. Both the entity and also the Mind Flayer likely have formed some kind of agreement, as we actually even saw the Mind Flayer in the realm itself for a period of time, suggesting the two are on good terms. An agreement between 2 otherworldly entities, which is a trend we see a lot, at least seemingly, as really this is all speculation. Another trend between these killers who are able to bend or adjust the rules to their liking is that they often acknowledge us as the player, or potentially the entity is what they're looking at. Both Jason and Vecna look back in some way and acknowledge our presence, which is quite interesting. Dracula doesn't necessarily adapt the trials too defiantly or openly, but he does bring along his whole castle with him to them, which in itself is somewhat of a bending of the rules, as no other killer is able to do this, or does do this. The presence therefore of the castle in the trials is a slight bending of the rules. In this case though, it's definitely an allowance by the entity and not defiance, as Dracula openly refers to the realm as Vampire Heaven.
This is Vampire Heaven.
Which means he likes it, which means the entity probably likes him and they're on good terms. Providing a powerful being like the Dark Lord himself some comforts is the least the entity can do, I'm sure. After all, having some of the more powerful characters in open rebellion is probably a lot tougher for the entity to handle compared to like the Trapper say, which is probably why the Trapper gets far more brutally punished compared to someone like Dracula. Also because Trapper is probably more motivated by that kind of punishment though. Vecna from D&D is quite interesting, as he's likely our first killer here who bends the rules, but is actually doing it defiantly. After all, Vecna is a self-proclaimed character who wants to one day overthrow the entity, and is currently studying it, trying to see how the realm functions and works so he can one day take it over. It's a bold move, and likely won't work, but you have to admire his ambition. Vecna's bending of the rules, our debate, comes in a few ways. For one, he's able to straight up lift pallets back up in the trials, a skill no one else is able to do, and he does it through his use of magic. This is a mechanic that shouldn't really be able to happen, lifting pallets back up once they've been dropped. This is presumably also a defiant act when the survivors do it with perks like Any Means Necessary. Once once a pallet is down, it's meant to be down. Then he's also able to mini-Mori survivors by reclaiming either the hand or eye of Vecna. His defiance I do think isn't warranted by the entity either, as the entity has restricted him by affixing the Mark of Negation onto him, suggesting it definitely wouldn't be on board with full defiance or rebellion, and it may be concerned of it, to some extent at least. I think it would be foolish not to take Vecna at least a little bit seriously, even if you're the entity. Therefore, the defiance and bending of the rules here may actually be out of the entity's control, or potentially even a compromise it's had to achieve, restricting Vecna in ways it can, but allowing him brief spurts of rebellion still, maybe even just to keep him content. Keep up the facade that he's rebelling in some way, when in reality this is all allowed, or something like that. Dredge is another character who I would argue does bend the rules, and does so in the way of blanketing the trials in darkness. This does seem to be a defiant act, as the undetectable status appears to be one the entity typically only grants to killers it trusts, or are in some way defiant. As we learn from Beast of Prey, the undetectable status appears to actually sever the killer's connection to the entity, making the killer unpredictable. This tracks as well for most of the stealth killers. Ghosty is known to be well loved by the entity, Wraith is trusted as he's been so deeply traumatized by it, and then there's killers like Myers who are defiant in some way, which we'll discuss later. Therefore, the undetectable status does appear to only belong to killers who are either trusted or defiant. In Dredge's case, it blankets the entire trial in darkness and severs its connection to the entity completely during this time, seemingly severing the entity's connection potentially throughout the entire trial too, because the darkness covers the whole trial. This therefore appears to be a very defiant act, potentially due to Dredge's power as what may be pure evil or dark thought, something not too dissimilar to the entity itself, this being a leading theory even, that the Dredge is a mini-entity, which is what would allow it to do this in the first place. The next defiant thing Dredge does is absorb or consume survivors entirely when it moris them. Unlike other killers who will finish the survivor, Dredge opts to absorb them into itself, which seemingly takes them out of the realm and into Dredge's own body or realm, meaning the entity gets nothing from this, and potentially even loses this iteration of the survivor, and must recreate them from scratch. I can't really see the entity being on board with this, and I imagine the reason the entity tolerates this defiance is because Dredge is otherwise incredibly scary and creates a lot of emotion from the survivors. In fact, I think this is probably the reason at all why it tolerates this, is because all of these characters are very powerful, and also probably very scary toward the survivors, and therefore they create more emotion and more fear, and therefore they're allowed more leniency essentially. They're like higher earners basically, so they get more rewards and benefits. Sadako is another example of bending the rules, with her able to do the same as many others with her mini-Mori. Hers is a bit different though, as she's actually able to do it regardless of hook state, which would seem to suggest she's either being openly more defiant, or she curries such favor that the entity simply allows this to happen. This tends to be what I think as well. Her entire condemned mechanic I think is likely allowed and encouraged by the entity, potentially because Sadako's anger is already so potent and creates such a high level of emotion. The entity and Sadako also have a strange but seemingly close relationship. When the entity saves Sadako from the well, there's a moment of quiet understanding between the two of them. When she opened her eyes, she stood on a desolate beach facing a vast, stormy ocean. A thick black fog caressed the water's surface. This passage to me seems like a quiet understanding between the two, and a moment of connection, and therefore I think it's highly unlikely this is defiance, but rather an allowed bending of the rules. Sadako, after all, is typically very angry and vengeful, yet in the presence of the entity, she is calm and watches the fog caress the sea. She has been given understanding by this otherworldly being, and it understands her needs so well, she's allowed to adjust the trials to her liking, yet still understands the entity's needs and desires, and so together, they're able to compromise and create something beautiful from their perspective, I guess, not so much from the survivors or ours. Pinhead also does seem to do something that bends the rules, mainly in the way of his Mori, where he actually teleports a survivor seemingly out of the realm entirely, and likely into the labyrinth or hell. This would seem like a very defiant act, especially as it suggests that Pinhead and Chatterer would be able to straight up leave if they wished. It's maybe even now why they've been removed from the game. They were able to do this. They simply left when they wanted to. This doesn't seem out of the question either, as similar to Vecna and Demogorgon, they have a powerful entity overlord in Leviathan, person watching over them, another entity that the entity may have made some sort of deal with. The Cenobites also appear to potentially just like the realm as well and be content with serving the entity, as their goals do somewhat align with its goals, especially with the reworked box in the trials, which in itself is an adjustment as well. Introducing the box mechanic does sort of deviate the main objective of the trial rules. It could be a simple win-win therefore. It does make you wonder though, do the Cenobites return the survivors eventually after taking them out of the realm? Does the portal really go to hell? Can they go through it if they please? Let me know what you think. Nemesis slightly bends the rules debatably with his presence of zombies alongside him. This one is super debatable, but arguably it does throw off the game's balance of 1 killer and 4 survivors, which is how the core trials function. Therefore the presence of 2 zombies is a bending of the core rules. Another though, which I do believe is entirely okay with the entity and likely even its own doing, as Nemesis is hardly powerful or would have the power or intelligence to negotiate this, so I think it's more just a bonus given to Nemesis by the entity. Pyramid Head is maybe the most well-known case of being openly defiant of the entity, at least seemingly, and bending the trial rules, with him adapting the trials quite substantially to his own will. First of all, he plants his blade physically into the trial grounds, an act which would potentially be painful to the entity as the ground is the entity itself. Next, Pyramid Head is one of the only killers in the game able to bypass hooks entirely, with him instead using cages if the survivors get afflicted with torment. These cages perform almost like their own separate form of hook, which spawn in specially for Pyramid Head, almost as if he has his own separate form of sacrifice going on during the match, separate from the entities entirely, meaning it wouldn't feed on this at all. Finally, Pyramid Head is also able to mini-mori the survivors once they've hit the second stage and been afflicted with torment. It all comes together to create quite a compelling image that Pyramid Head is actually quite defiant, and pretty directly toward the entity, with all of these adaptations to the trial rules and many ways in which it seems to subtly fight back. This is probably the best case too of it not being very clear either way. Maybe the entity has lots of respect for Pyramid Head, and maybe it simply allows him these benefits due to him being powerful. Maybe it is defiant, but the entity kind of likes it, or it's just another way for it to gain emotion. As after all, in all of these cases, the entity is more powerful than every single one of these characters. If these are cases of defiance, the entity is essentially allowing them to be defiant. I think it is interesting to consider why though, where when say Trapper defies the entity in its rules, it puts him in his place, where when Pyramid Head does it, it seems to just not care at all. I think it's largely down to when it benefits the killer and their obedience or not. Many of the killers who are defiant after all are not ones too in touch with their humanity, or human at all, suggesting that they may not be as motivated by the fear of punishment, or simply feel the need to follow the rules in the first place. So the entity compromises and bends the rules for their needs, the emotional potential outweighing the emotion lost from their defiance and disobedience. You can break the more human killers, but when it comes to someone like Pyramid Head, who is a manifestation of James's mind and a creation of Silent Hill, I feel like you just can't really do that. Also, Pyramid Head would probably be like kind of into it, so it's like, you know, how do you approach that? You adjust the rules and you make it work for them. Plague could be debated to bend the trial rules, as she makes it so it's nearly impossible to heal naturally due to her infection inflicting broken. This surely does alter the flow of the trials and disrupt how the entity must envision them going, as the survivors are no longer able to cooperatively heal, which must be a moment when they are able to perform altruism, a core moment, which is one of the key methods of emotion created in the trials. One of the core 4 ways in fact, the core blood point categories, is essentially what's creating emotion. The blood points basically represent the emotion being created. Plague, however, is the most devoted out of any of the killers to the entity, and therefore this is highly unlikely as defiance, but instead a natural allowance by the entity, or more than likely even just straight up the entity's design, choosing it to be like this. Because sure, they can't heal, but equally, being infected with this mysterious ancient plague is probably equally as scary for them. Pig is an interesting case, with her technically being defiant too in the way she utilizes her reverse bear traps, which obviously have the potential to straight up kill survivors on any hook state. This is a rare case, of course, as I was just mentioning with Pyramid Head, where we have a killer who is very much human and just a person, yet seemingly being openly defiant of the rules and bending them. This is a case therefore where it has to be just that the entity allows it, likely due to the amount of emotion that having a reverse bear trap on has. It has to be a deeply traumatizing and scary experience after after all. I mean, it certainly was for Amanda herself. Having this mysterious contraption on your head that could make it explode has got to be terrifying. I also think the entity likely facilitates this bending of the rules because it realizes what Pig's motivations are. When she comes to the realm, she actually believes she was right, and Jigsaw never gave up on her, and therefore all she did was right too with her rigging the saw traps. This means in order to keep up the facade that Amanda believes, and motivates her and her emotions, it must keep her content by allowing her to rig the trials to some extent too, in the same way, with her utilizing reverse bear traps that can kill at any point. Of course, these traps in reality are often quite escapable, but Amanda might not know that. It could be the entity's design again, allowing her to believe such, but rarely does it go that way. Myers is maybe the most well-known case of rule bending and defiance, with him famously for many years being able to straight up kill survivors even before hooking them. Yeah, with Tombstone or Tombstone Piece, you could just walk over and grab the survivor and mori them. This was slowly adjusted over the years, then requiring 1 hook, then 2, then finally being implemented currently into his kit as a final move he can do after double hooking a survivor and being in his powered up Evil Within mode. I quite like the idea that when Myers first came to the realm, he was uncontrollable and unwieldy because he wasn't meant to be there. The entity hadn't prepared for him and hadn't prepared the adjustments it would use for his trials. That's how the theory goes, at least, is that Myers sort of just walked into the realm on his own volition, with Benedict even hinting toward it to some extent. This would make sense why the entity took its time adjusting to this new presence, which was never meant to be there, as it literally wasn't prepared and was unable to immediately adjust and adapt to the presence of Myers. Myers has of course also now left in a not too dissimilar way to the Cenobites, suggesting he may have always had a lot more autonomy over how he performs in the trials, and similarly, the entity must be okay with it to some extent. Or again, it allows him these freedoms due to being highly powerful or fear-inducing just by his own nature. Nurse is our final character who seems to bend the trial rules, and she does so more so with her power rather than adapting the trials themselves, like most other killers. I'd argue Nurse does break or bend the rules though, as she literally doesn't play by them. She doesn't have to interact with windows or pallets, or even the physical walls and floors that the entity has placed within the trial grounds. However, Nurse's power is an entirely entity-given thing and creation, and therefore this bending of the rules would be entirely purposeful, as at any point the entity could just decide to strip Nurse of these powers or give her something else. Instead, it wants her to be this powerful and to have these abilities, likely to make her far more feared, and potentially even to make the other killers jealous, which does seem to be a thing we see from the perspective of Ghostface. I mean, I get it, bro. The entity gives you some funny little floaty tassels, but makes Nurse into an unstoppable killing machine that can bypass every single thing that the survivors can use to fight back in some way. I'm sure the killers would love that kind of power, but instead it's being bestowed onto a killer who doesn't even want to be one, more than likely, which is quite fascinating, and probably even quite infuriating for many of the killers who really want to be killers, like, I don't know, Legion say. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts as always down below. Thanks, and goodbye.